to Catalog and Cocktails, presented by Data.World, the data catalog for leveraging agile data governance to give power to people and data. We're coming to you live from Austin, Texas, and somewhere else. It's an honest, no BS, non salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime data nerd and product guy at Data.World, joined by Juan.
Hey, I'm Juan Sequeda, principal scientist here at Data.World. And as always, it's a pleasure. It's middle of the week, towards the end of the day, and it's our time to take a break and chat about data. And today's data and AI. We have our guest today, which is Teresa Kushner, who is the head of North American Innovation Center at NTT Data. Teresa, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you, guys. It's so great to be here with you.
So glad to
we
have
think
you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, you have so much vast experience and be able to go talk a lot about data and AI here today. But first, let's kick it off. So, what are we drinking and what are we toasting for today? Teresa, you want to kick us off?
I am at work, so unfortunately, I'm not toasting. I'm not drinking anything, but I'm toasting to the success of this show today. How about that?
Oh, awesome.
Excellent. Yeah, no, we've had a little bit of some glitches to test them out. I think we're okay. We'll see how this goes today.
Good.
How about you, Tim?
I am today drinking a Cayman Jack margarita. It comes in a highly portable form, but it is a cocktail, which I thought was appropriate. And I will toast to hanging out with awesome data people, which we've got two awesome data people here and one person who's drinking margaritas.
All right. Well, I'm actually here. I have a real cocktail here today. It's called the Beat the Jet Lag. It's a beet infused Don Julio with dry curacao, lime juice, agave, and some Lagavulin spritz. I'm actually getting off a plane. I'm at the United Polaris Lounge right now. So we do this real live. So I'm cheering for. Hey, you get to travel and get to pause and go find a place to go do the podcast. So here we are. Cheers.
Awesome. Cheers.
Incredible.
Yeah. So, kind of timely warm up question, which is planes, trains, and automobiles. What's your favorite way to travel and why?
My favorite way to travel is automobile, simply because you get to see everything and you can stop when you want to. You don't have to pay attention to where you are or get your seat up to go to the restroom. You can just stop and do your thing. I love that part.
How about
But
you, Tim?
I'm waiting for my self-driving car because I figure that'll be an even better way to get around.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. That'll be fun. I do like the freedom that comes with driving in an automobile, right? You can kind of
Mhm.
control your own destiny there. I really think trains are cool. So like I think that's my preferred way to travel, but mostly because like I like the idea of it. I wish we had really good, trains here in America because I would use that all the time. When I was in Europe and also when I was in
Mhm.
Asia, using trains is a great way to travel and can be really fast. So I like trains.
Yeah.
So because I'll have to take the other one, right? So I'm going to take planes. I mean, I am a big avid flyer traveler. I'm a United 1K. I've already flown 1 million miles on United. I'm literally doing this from the airport right now. So I would think it's fascinating is that you sit in that chair in some metal tube like for 10 hours and suddenly you're in a different world in a different environment. That's just fascinating. So I was in Munich yesterday or this morning, and now I'm here. So that's
It's
pretty
modern
cool.
teleportation, right?
There we go. But all right, let's kick it off with our honest no BS discussion. All right, so Teresa, honest no BS. Are the
Okay.
data teams keeping up with the AI teams?
Uh, Generally, I would say they're struggling a little bit. The data teams are trying to get the data in shape for the AI guys to use, but there's a lot of work that has to be done from a data engineering perspective to supply that to an AI data scientist. And that's why most of the data scientists say that 70% of their time is spent on getting the data right. And then when the data scientists take over, they create feature sets that are brand new sets of data that somebody in the organization has to manage. So it's a sort of a they need each other, but it's a contentious relationship often if data engineers are assigned to data scientists.
That last part that you said, that when the data scientists get the data, which will come from the data teams, and then they start generating these feature sets, which themselves are other data sets. That's something that the data teams are not managing very well. So you may have, for example, some governance set up for the data from the data teams and the data products that may come out, but then the AI teams are doing things too, and are they following kind of the same guidelines or not? I think that's a very important something to consider, because then we're not being aligned within the organization.
Yeah, that's a very big consideration, especially from a governance perspective. I was talking to someone this morning about the fact that when we look at governance overall, there's a brand new way of managing data, and we're looking at data as a product. That's what all the new organizations are doing, is how can I look at my data as a product? What kinds of things do I have to do to protect it? What kinds of things do I have to do to manage it or catalog it? But in that world, there's got to be an exchange somewhere and a governance process that manages the data, so that I can know, if I'm in marketing, how much my data is worth to sales if they want to utilize it, and what the value is of my information. So we've got some contentious things from a governance perspective set up. And if you're managing your own product and your own organization as a data set of some sort, then you have that kind of control where you can actually say who gets to use your feature sets and who doesn't. So you've got a sort of a contained environment, which is sort of what we're heading for with the Web 3.0 and some of the other kinds of innovations that are coming down the pike.
Interesting. Do you find that data teams and AI teams are often kind of embedded with each other? Are you finding that they tend to be very separate from each other? And if they're separate, like, are they helping each other, or are they kind of avoiding each other? Right? What's the relationship between these teams?
Yeah, it just depends on what the culture is in the business that you go into. If you've got someone who's got a strong data culture and everybody in the organization understands the value of the data and they're helping to manage it, then you don't find that contentious relationship at all. I've managed analytics teams a lot in my life, and usually analytics teams are set to take advantage of whatever has been put together from a data perspective. And usually the data resides in an IT organization, because data is created by applications and applications belong to IT. And so that's where most of the data sources end up. Analytics teams don't often end up there. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They often end up in finance or in operations, where they can use the information to be more valuable to the business. So that sort of sets up this divide, and it shouldn't be a divide. There should be a coming together of those two sources for sure.
Interesting. Yeah. So there actually is in some cases, structural reason why these groups are in different parts of the organization. And if your company is not good at making those different groups work together, or has a culture that's against that, then that can cause some problems. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So one thing that you just said there, which I find very insightful, is that the data teams are usually the ones who are starting to go. I mean, the AI teams are the ones who are consuming the data, right? And then also this happens a lot in the analytics, but they're not used to be able to. They're not used to be the ones who are producing the data. But we're now starting to see a shift of like, well, hey, if the application is the one producing the data, and then you have the other teams who are consuming them, this is not just a divide. Like, oh, you're a team that produces data, go manage that. You're a team that consumes data. Here's how you consume it. We need to have kind of these ways of being able to go say, hey, you're actually producing and consuming at the same time, or consuming and then producing based on what you consumed. What are your thoughts and kind of guidelines on how we should best kind of define kind of best practices approaches for teams who are only producing data? I don't know if that's actually the case. Or teams who are only consuming the data, and teams who are consuming and both producing the data.
Yeah, it's a very interesting sort of conundrum that we are in right now, because you're absolutely right. The AI teams produce data because they do produce feature sets. They also produce algorithms that go into all kinds of applications. And so that becomes almost a data set itself. You've heard this concept about data is the new code. And in a way, that's exactly what we're talking about. So now all of a sudden you have people that have got to manage all different kinds of data. And it's not just data that is coming at them fast, like streaming data or IoT data. So it's not those kinds of types. We haven't even talked about that yet. We're talking about normal, ordinary data. And how do they manage that in an organizational construct? They manage it with the IT organizations because that's where they need to be, but they also need to be able to manage it with a data structure and a data organization. And I've been around you guys long enough to know that you predominantly sell or try to sell into the chief data officers, okay? But I'm sure you've noticed that chief data officers.
And I think we lost Teresa there for a second.
Oh,
Teresa,
no.
you're back. You're back. You're just saying that you're selling into the chief data officer.
Yeah. So the chief data officer, but the chief data officer has acquired this new thing called analytics. So they've got a chief data and analytics officer. And what that does is that it puts all of your data in one place so that you can begin to manage what you need to manage from both a data and an AI and analytics perspective. So I think that's where you see a lot of these coming together. Again, though, I always hesitate to tell people this, is that when you give the responsibility of data to one organization within a company, everyone else says it's not my problem. And that's sort of like when you give quality control to a quality organization, quality doesn't become anybody's problem but those guys. And I think that's what we're seeing, is that a lot of the analytics and a lot of the data quality and a lot of the data problems that go to the chief data and analytics officer, they stop there. So it's got to be an integrated organization. And that's why I'm kind of excited about having data products, because data products puts sort of a dispersed organization out to each of finance or to marketing or to HR. And it gives them the right to control their in the way that they think is important, gives them the right to secure it, gives them the right to have it used in a certain way. So from that perspective, that's also where you guys come in, because a lot of what happens with those organizations is the first thing they have to do is catalog and manage their data, get it in shape so that they can be able to sell it or to be able to process it in other organizations. So there's a lot of opportunity for you in those spaces.
Yeah, interesting. And so when you, just to go back a little bit to this data products, conversation that you're bringing up, and that's a topic that comes up quite often on the show. Are you thinking about data products in terms of, you had mentioned that like that gives the opportunity for the group to have more, ownership and control around that. Are you thinking about that in terms of the data products that are coming more from the different parts of the business, that they can then kind of publish a data product into this marketplace or things like that?
I guess the best example that I have is that in working in a lot of organizations, HR data is pretty secured data. Okay. And to get HR data into a sales organization or into a finance organization usually takes an act of God or the CEO, whatever. It's not one of those things that people just make available. But if HR can make their data available in a product sort of way, a productized way, then you have the ability as a sales organization to purchase that data and use it in the way that would create value for your organization. That way, HR can feel better about securing it and making it part of their product set. So they can do the things that keep their data keep it up to date, they keep it accurate, they keep it moving within the organization.
Okay, so you said you said yes, it does, and you said something key here, which is purchasing the data.
Mhm.
I am very eager to dive into so a couple things. I want to talk about this purchasing the data. So how are you thinking about chargeback models around this? I want to expand on
Mhm.
that. Second, I want to expand also on the CDO versus the CDAO.
Mhm.
What is the true differentiation around this? Because I mean, putting the analytics in there, there's a difference in there. But I wanted to kind
Yeah.
of continue on that thread. And the third thread is something you said about data as code
Yeah.
for AI teams. All
Yeah.
right. So I'll let you continue because this is fascinating discussion where this is going.
Oh goodness, I don't even remember three of those were. Um,
So let's start with purchasing data.
purchasing data.
Expand on your thoughts on purchasing data.
It's okay. First of all, let's look at what we have to purchase. And purchasing data starts with, first of all, you have to value it. You have to set a value on what your data is. And I'm not talking about selling your inside the company. I'm talking about the value managed between organizations. So you can value your data in any way that you have to, but you've got to get it straight. You've got to have the metadata there. You've got to know what the value is to the people that you're going to make it available to. And there has to be some sort of exchange. In some of the organizations where I've seen this work well, you have an exchange that is a centralized corporate function that actually manages what people can put in. So they control what the cost might be or how it might be worked between organizations, sort of like the stock exchange does in a way, but it's an exchange. And I think that's probably the best answer to it. And it also gives you a place to manage governance a little bit more effectively. You get a centralized organization that's managing the exchange of data across the organization. That's a very helpful thing.
I like this comparison you did with the stock exchange. This makes sense, and it also, I think it's some bar, right? Because it's not, you're not going to put all data in there. It's like, wait. You have to the data that is going to go into that exchange is data that has well-defined value that other people are already convinced, right? It's almost like you're going to do an initial public offering for your data.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is a fascinating point. I did not think we were going to get here today. I love this.
Well, the data products analogy kind of ties in well as well, right? Because to put something on the exchange, you need to make that product available. It has to meet certain standards and things like that.
And it very quickly tells you where you should be putting attention to the data quality. If your product is not moving in that data exchange, if nobody really wants to use it, why are you putting it up there? Don't you have a different process for managing it than you might have for something that's more valuable? Actually, and in actuality, the feature sets that get created in an AI organization are often some of the most valuable data sets that could be made available in an exchange.
That's interesting. I think there's a lot of our listeners that may not be as fully versed in some of the things that are going on in the AI space, and so I'm curious if you could go into a little bit more detail just for folks that are looking to understand a little bit more, like what are sometimes these feature sets that are coming out of AI teams and things like that, and
I'm
and why
trying
is that like a useful data set?
Well, for example, I might have an application that keeps information about the square footage of houses, okay, that I'm selling if it's a real estate application. But I also keep how much those houses sell for in a different set. So if I'm creating something in an artificial intelligence algorithm where I really want to have the cost per square footage managed, and it's not a field in any data that I have, I create a feature set. And now all of a sudden I have a brand new data element that can enter into my algorithm, enter into my analysis of some sort. That's what I'm talking about, feature sets. It's that creation of those data elements that come together that may not be in your data in a native way. It's got to be something that has to be created.
Right. Okay. So now you've got these new fields that can be leveraged that are augmenting your data here. And in some cases, certain AI applications may be creating many hundreds, many thousands, or even more of these types
Many.
of different observations and fields, right?
This is a fantastic point, because you'd think that in this exchange that you could have, like, what are the data products people would be interested in, are the ones that would augment the data I have. And those are the ones that could probably be traded the most. And those are
Exactly.
probably not things that are specific to my company, right? Specific, not the transactional type of data that's going to be used for analytics, but it's other external things. So,
Could be. It
but
could very well be.
yeah, so that's a very interesting point to go do that. I mean, to try to find like what has the most value, right?
Well,
Defining
and
value here.
the exchange too can be used for external data as well. If you
Yeah.
have external data, because if you've got an exchange set up, then you've got a way to manage who's using it, how much it's valued at when it's used, how often it's used. You've got information about that data that you wouldn't necessarily have otherwise.
This is great. So let's go on the topic of the CDO versus the CDAO. Like, how are you seeing this today? Because from my perspective, CDO is what you hear the most, and not as much CDAO. And so please make the definitions of these two and how they compare.
Yeah, it's in organizations where data is really, really important, you get a CDO, and the CDO understands what to do. I just read an article today about the fact that we're not hiring CDOs that understand the business. For the most part, CDOs are getting hired as technical people who grew up in the technical side of the house. And CDOs need to be people who understand the value of data. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to understand the value of data infrastructure. You need to understand the value of the data that you have. So I think that what happened a couple of years ago is that we saw the rise of artificial intelligence. Every CEO in the world, everyone I talk to, we got to have an AI team. Well, what does that mean? And why do you have to have them? So because they needed AI, they thought, oh, well, AI and data, that goes together. Let's put analytics into the chief data officer's organization. And let's face it, most of the time, managing data is not a very sexy job. I got to tell you, it's hard. It's just, it is just the most thankless job in the entire world. And I tell you, for 25, I've had that thankless job. So it's not one of those things that's just really everybody wants to go into. But analytics, everybody does. Because analytics drive revenue, it drives cost savings, it drives all the things that executives in a company like and understand. So now you have the worst job in the company, data, coupled with the best job in the company, and you've got an all right job. But one or the other, it's not the same thing. So
I love it.
This is a perfect, honest, no BS take right there.
I'm sorry.
CDO.
This is what I
No, this is perfect. I love this because yeah, I mean, you see organizations whether they focus on the data and they get too much into the weeds too, right? And they lack all that business literacy. They understand the people outside of their bubble doesn't know, like, why are you doing that? Like, I don't see the value of that. Like, oh, but we need all these things. Like, well, I don't understand that. But the moment they do the analytics, that's when that's how they connect more. But how you're successful at analytics is that if you know the business.
Exactly. Every company I've ever worked for where they told me I needed to go do master data, the next thing I would tell them is, when I get this all together, what are you going to do with it? Because the interesting point is that nobody cares about the data and how it's cataloged or managed. That's like, how do you care about your library? Are all of your books in alphabetical order in your personal library? Yeah, probably not. And if they were, what value would that bring you? It would save you X number of minutes a day because you know exactly where this one volume is. But, executives don't understand that. What they do understand is the use of that data once it's been cataloged and managed and available for use. And it's that analytics side that captures the attention. So never take a data job without taking the analytics job too.
Sounds like you're
That's-
pro keeping them together.
That's my recommendation.
No, so this is a good point. Is it should there be a CDO or should there be a CDAO in an organization?
If you're going to put analytics, you need to put them together, I think. Yeah, it needs to be a chief data and analytics officer.
So are you predicting that the titles of CDOs are going to go down and we're going to see CDAOs increasing?
Actually, the article I was reading says that's already beginning to happen. That's beginning to happen. I think it's like 70% of corporations that were in this survey have CDOs, but they're just now beginning to move them to CDAOs. And, that's where the attention will get, because that's the point at which you can prove that your data is valuable, is with the analytics that you do with it.
That's interesting. I know that at Data.World, we work with a lot of different roles. We work with a lot of CDOs. We work a lot of CDAOs. And it is interesting to see when you're working with somebody who's more of a CDAO, who has more analytics in their role as well, just how they're approaching some problems differently, right? Like, whereas a CDO may get pulled more into like, we got to do our master data management initiative or whatever. You see CDAOs often getting pulled more into, hey, we've got some sort of a business problem. We know that data is the answer to solve it, and I'm tasked with making sure that we can solve that problem, right?
Yep, exactly. And they have more of an urgency sometimes than a CDO does. A CDO knows he's in it for the long haul. It's not a job that you can do in a year or 6 months. It's a job that takes years to do if you're trying to clean up someone's data and make it available to everyone in a way that's acceptable. The CAO, the analytics officer, is out there to generate things immediately. They've been hired to bring in and use that data as quickly as possible. So it's a matter of, that's why when you mix them together, you sort of get a good feel in the middle.
Yeah. So if you do mix them together, then you are bringing in let's be efficient and what I call the efficiency and resilience. So we need to go solve our problems today, but let's make sure that we're building that infrastructure. We're building that muscle on creating data products, focus on the data side. When the technical thing, but the analytics is what's connecting it to the business.
Right.
So another thing that you came up, I'd like to expand is data as code.
Data as code.
Can you expand on that, please?
Well, I think that what we're seeing a lot of is in the AI world, data makes AI work. Without it, there is no AI. It's all predictive patterns. And in these kinds of environments, all of a sudden, what you do with AI and an algorithm, all the data that's used is the code that is being managed. And I give a good example is that at NTT in the Innovation Center, we do a lot of things with what we call virtual humans. In other words, responsive avatars. And the data that comes in for those avatars is being pulled from a lot of different places, not just information that we want the avatar to be able to answer a question with, but the avatars are reading your facial expressions and deciding how they should respond to you. That is becoming part of the entire makeup of what we look at from a code perspective for that avatar. So that data becomes part of what is actually fed out into the avatar itself, into the vision that you see on the screen. So it's data as code. There's a lot more behind that, and I'm not technical enough to be able to tell you all of it, but that's one of the things that we're looking forward to in the future. And when you start to look at when you look at the Web 3.0 and what we're doing with that, the community of a Web 3.0 environment is to have the data be part of everything that works in that, and we're going to protect that data. We're going to be able to manage that data within that community. And so the code, making it part of the code, part of what you do. The other thing is that with generative AI, we're not going to be generating code very much longer anyway. the AI algorithms themselves are going to start to generate the code. And that's going to make it very different. I mean, we already do that. We generate art with AI. We generate music with AI. We generate, my favorite, we generate white papers with AI. That's my favorite. Because I could write a white paper in about 20 minutes with an AI generating capability.
Yeah, I just saw, what was it, yesterday, a couple of days ago, one of the another of these language models that took all the scientific papers, right? And then they're like, well, now you can just make summaries, tutorials about the latest bits of science. Now, now that stuff is not always working very well, but that's what we're heading towards. So
Yeah.
no, for sure. So then, what are your suggestions for companies, organizations that have kind of the data teams and the AI teams, the CDOs, or the separated from the AI analytics? Like, what's your message to them right now?
Oh, where they have everything separated out, and is you can do that if you've got collaborative people. I mean, we've got Republicans and Democrats in Congress. They've got to be able to work together. You know, I'm sure a really big challenge, but it doesn't matter where you put it. You've just got to make sure that the systems allow you to talk together and you're going after the same things. I think the thing that I would look at is, people operate on directives that they are given and what their KPIs are, because that's how they usually get paid. So manage your KPIs effectively for data and for the analytics team. Manage them together so that they have the same sort of goals to go after. That would be my advice. Whether you've got them split up or you've got them in the same organization, look at what you're managing with them against.
Interesting.
That's a very key one, because it pisses me off, with all due respect. I say this when you see people saying, well, no, data is everywhere, so it's super hard to go put the ROI on our data that we're doing. I'm like, that's crap. That's just an excuse. You need to be able to go define, understand how you're providing that value, because if you're not, guess what, everybody in the organization is accountable. Everybody.
Yes, everybody.
So, like, why are you on some magic high horse or whatever that you can't? No, of course. So, if you're not able to go do that, then you're in the wrong place, and you're not being set up for success. So, and so what I like is how you're saying is, like, all of these teams, the data analytics teams, they should have shared kind of KPIs going forward, and they both need to understand where the business is going, and align this. That's a very key point right there.
And align it. Yeah, that's the thing, is that data is so important. It's so much, it's sort of the blood of the body of a corporation. It makes things happen in the company. But for years, it's been something that's been sort of neglected. It's an after product of an application, or an after product of I'm pulling everything together, I'm putting it in one space. We don't treat it right. And it needs to be broader accepted. It's that same concept of quality. If I give quality to someone else, it's their job, which means I don't have any kind of quality about my work, because it's your job. You got to check it out. You got to do all the QA to make it possible. We've learned a long time ago that doesn't work. You've got to get quality to everyone. So everyone manages data. Everyone manages data. It used to just irritate the bejesus out of me for sales guys to say, when I was trying to create capabilities from an analytics perspective, and yet sales guys could not be bothered to enter information into salesforce.com because that took too long, or you're going to stop my sale or something, without the understanding that what they put into that application could be used to develop more clients for them, could be used to sell more products for them, and it was such short-sightedness, because my goal was to sell product. Now, if I had a goal that was a KPI from sales that also said, I've got to maintain my client information at a certain level, wouldn't that be nice?
This is so spot on what you just said right here. I mean, everybody needs to be part. Everybody is managing data, and everybody needs to take responsibility of the data and the quality of the data. And what you just the example you just gave, like, hey, salespeople in Salesforce, go add it in because it's going to have an implication. I mean, you are right there, the person who is producing the data. The data is being produced by human, not a machine, right here. So we got to take ownership about that stuff. And it reminds me of bring this up. I know we're the non-salesy podcast, but this is a really great example. Is one of the folks that we work with, Prologis. They the CEO has a mandate on quality of data, CEO mandate, and they said the 20% of the bonus of everybody in the company is tied to the data quality. And what they did was identify very specific business use cases that they tie it to. Here's a column of data that if there's no values, the example I always give is there's a height of a warehouse. What happens if I don't have the correct height of a warehouse?
Right.
I'm leaving money on the table because I could have packed more boxes when I actually thought I could pack more and I can't, so I'm into trouble, right? But
Right.
the goal there wasn't about, oh, let's go improve the quality of data of certain data elements. No, it was about creating that culture, and I think this is the super
Exactly.
important part about it. So yeah, I really love this, and it ties back to how we're actually providing value here, right, within the
Right.
data side and the analytics side.
Hmm. Yeah,
Who
I
do
think that's
you
a really
guys who do you
powerful
guys service most? Do you service the CDO or the C I mean, or the analytics officer?
I think that's a good question. I think we most often are seeing catalogs being adopted and brought on by the data office, the CDO, some cases the governance office, right? Data architecture in some cases, right? So we're seeing it more that sort of central data office of some form or fashion. In some cases, it may be, analytics and things like that, but not as often as you might think, unless it is kind of a unified function where it's more data and
Yeah.
analytics working together. At least that's what we've been seeing,
Yeah,
So
and I would actually argue that you see people coming in more from the technical side, right? Oh, I need to we need catalogs to be able to go manage or lineage, or where does this data come from, right? A lot more technical things, or protections, right? The governance is to protect the data, and then
Right.
there's on the other side, there's like, well, no, we need the data to be found. So then those folks who would have our play is to go do discovery data. We need to go search for data. So those types of use cases we'll see are more about, I need to expose the data, people to go use it more for analytics. So we see both of those types of things. So and the trend that we're definitely seeing constantly is about the data products. I
Mhm.
think everybody's talking about it, and everybody, and there's a handful of people who have very opinionated views about them. Tim and I have one. We have our data products ABCs. We're opinion about that. We're just figuring this out, but I think the principles of, like, hey, there needs to have some sort of responsibility, ownership around that stuff, and what I'm starting to hear more and more, but little, but still more of it is the value list,
I
tying the
think,
value to the data
yeah.
products.
And I think the issue that we're going to have when we start to look at data products is that the skill sets for managing a data product are a little bit different than those for managing data. So, that's the issue that we're trying to solve, is that you actually have to have sort of a product manager in there. They have to understand what it is to create a product, sustain it, test it, make it available, understanding their market. It's a little different than just managing data. So I think that's where we're gonna hit a little bit of a
I,
stop.
I I really like that you're bringing that up because I think that folks are underestimating that at the moment, right? I think they're excited about this idea of data products, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we should treat our data more like a product and start to build out some data products and identify them and things like that." But there is definitely a mentality and an approach and a toolkit that
Mhm.
product managers have, if you just want to bring it from
That's
the
right.
software world,
That's right.
around, like what you mentioned, testing. Another aspect that I like to bring up with folks is around the life cycle, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Usually data, we just think, oh yeah, you produce the data and there it is,
And
it's
that's
sitting in
it.
the lake, right? But
That's
a
it.
product manager thinks, oh, well, maybe I should retire that product, or,
Right.
is it deprecated? You think about the life cycle of it.
Right. And as a product manager, you have to think about the market too. What am I really doing with this? I mean, do I need all of this? All these are skill sets that people that manage data don't have in abundance. And so it's going to be a different world.
Right.
This is
Data,
something
data experience design is going to maybe start to become a
Yeah,
thing. What are
exactly.
the user
we've
stories
we've been
around?
talking we've been talking about data marketing. So, like, I mean, apply marketing 101 principles to how we do data. I mean, you have to, who are the users, right? I mean,
Yeah,
go talk to the users. What is the market? Where is it heading? And let's actually go promote it, right? So you have,
exactly.
let's go create ads for our
That's
data,
it.
such that,
Right, right. That's right.
right, and how
So,
people, and understand how people are using it today, and give those examples, right? Because at
right.
the end it goes back to the KPIs. It's like, well, if this is actually producing value, and can we get, if some groups are already getting value out of this,
Yeah.
maybe
And
others
the
can get out of it too. So let's go see.
product versioning, things that like that, that you might today the data might represent certain thing, but tomorrow it's going to be different. And what are the versions? How do you keep that? How do you make sure your customers are still happy? It's all the things you learn about software management from a product perspective.
But
Yeah.
even more, even take it, it's what is product, but also it's, I think, the marketing side. And I've been having these discussions. I think I encourage, like, all their data teams out there, the data analytics teams, is to go talk to the folks in your marketing team.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them, hey, assume that the product that we sell is our internal data. How should we market that? I think that's something we're not considering. I mean, we're not even scratching the surface on that. There's so much to go do. It helps us also to get more integrated with an organization. Let's have everybody talking about this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Oftentimes, though, it comes back to that question of you can't really create a product around something that's not valuable. So you have to determine what the value of the data is. And that's where a lot of people get lost to begin with.
Ah, definitely, definitely. And so before we head out to our lightning round, I'd love to kind of wrap up with, like, just your final kind of takeaways that you would like to go. What is the message you want to go give out to more of the teams out there, right? Because we discussed, like, there's a missed opportunities by data engineers and data teams, but they need to go step up. So what is, if you have those data teams out there who are listening to you, what's your message to them to say how can they keep up with all the analytics and the AI efforts that are going on?
One of the things I would say to the data teams, and I've seen this a lot, is that as data teams, we get really integrated. We want to go deep into what we do. We really want to understand if it's master data or if it's ETLs. We really want to understand that, and I would encourage them to broaden it out. This is the time where it's important to understand the big picture first, and to make sure they understand the entire landscape before they zero in on one part of the data supply chain, so to speak.
Right. So, and people like to zoom in. It's time to zoom out and see the forest from the trees.
Exactly. Exactly. It is time to do that. And I've been a data lover for my entire career. So anything in the world that is good for data has got to be good for the world. That's the way I look at it. If you can manage data well, you can manage the world well. And we've learned that already. We learned it at COVID. We didn't have good data for COVID and we didn't manage it well. We don't have all the data we need for managing climate control. So manage the data well and the world takes care of it.
I love that. That's a great thing to recommend and to say there. And maybe one last set of takeaways before we move to lightning round. For companies out there that are thinking about AI initiatives and how AI can make an impact.
Hmm.
Do you have any tips on folks trying to, scrounge up funding for AI initiatives, or what can be most impactful to focus on?
Yep, I do. This is my favorite question. I always tell people who are looking to do AI teams, I always ask this question: what is it that is the biggest problem in your company that you think AI can solve? And they don't necessarily understand what that big problem is, but they're willing to go solve it. So if you can find a problem within the company that is something that they really care about and apply AI to it, that's how you get an AI program sold. What I've discovered over these years is that a lot of times the biggest problems in a company can be solved with just plain ordinary analytics, not necessarily AI. But AI, they think they need because it's the magic word. And quite frankly, Gartner's told us that AI includes analytics. It's sort of the entire world. Now we're calling everything AI. So I think that's sort of something that people need to look at, is why would you really spend all of that money to put up an AI organization if you can do it with statistical analysis?
Oh, this is a perfect. I love this. Thank you for sharing this, because this is you got to be honest and no BS with yourself
Yeah.
and everybody right now. Do you really need all this fancy AI, or could you do it with our traditional BI reporting analytics tools? If you
Right.
can do that, then what is the extra value that it provide? Otherwise, you're trying to go use this fancy object, fancy tool. You don't need to. Be honest and no BS, please.
Yeah, and apply AI for the problems that really should have AI applied.
Yeah. Anyways, this has been an awesome conversation. Let's go to our lightning round, which is presented by Data.World, the data catalog for successful cloud migration. I'm going to kick it off. So, are AI opportunities in companies underinvested at the moment or overinvested?
I think they're underinvesting always in data. Everybody underinvests in data because it's easy to sort of skimp it. And a little bit of overinvesting, I think, in setting up AI organizations that may not be useful.
Interesting. That's helpful. All right, second question. You mentioned that CDAOs are a rising trend.
Yes.
Should AI be part of that charter? Should it be CDAAIO?
Well, it's analytics. I just throw it all in there together. The A is AI and analytics. Yes, it should be. It should
But
be.
hold on,
Analytics and AI together.
but didn't you just say that Gartner's saying that, and that's confusing people because
That's
then they're
confusing
pulling?
people. Yeah,
All right,
they
so
do.
all right, so A means analytics and AI, but know which one you're
Well,
using. Which of the A's?
yeah, and the problem with it is that artificial intelligence is not just one brand, no one variety. You've got NLP, you've got all the different kinds of, you got machine learning, you've got all these different sort of things that AI is. And so it became sort of the umbrella term for everything. So for machine learning and for NLP and for statistical analysis, it became everything.
That's a
All
very
right,
good point.
next question. So we're now seeing these roles called AI engineers or ML, machine learning engineers, and we have
Oh.
data engineers. They continue to rise. Does that mean that the data scientist role is going away, or is this just a rebranding of the data scientist role?
These are just taking what the data is, because we can't find data scientists all the time, and because they're sort of rare, and they're expensive once you do find them. What they're trying to do is utilize as much of the data scientist as possible by creating machine learning engineers or data engineers to support the guys that are doing the statistical analysis, the guys that are running the codes. So that's why you've got this machine learning, because machine learning data engineers are going to be the ones that are going to end up managing the product of the feature sets. They're going to have to work those back into some organization of some sort. So machine learning engineers are important. I have seen that. In fact, not too long ago, I had to do a job description for what a machine learning engineer is versus a data engineer.
Interesting. This is an interesting takeaway here around augmenting the data scientist with more specialized roles, since it's
Yeah.
hard to find all these data scientists, right?
Yeah. I was at MIT a couple of weeks ago, and I heard one of the professors there say that by the year, and my light's going out here, by the year 2030, we would require about 1 million more data scientists than we have. So I'm sorry, my lights. I'm in witness
Oh,
protection.
no worries.
Actually, this was funny because it happened. The exact same thing happened to our guest last week.
Yeah.
His advice was, "You got to move around in your office."
Yeah,
I gotta move around.
All right, final question, Tim.
All right. So our fourth question here. Right now, the dashboard report is kind of the primary thing that people think of as the end result after you do a data analysis, right? It's like, oh, it's the dashboard, right? Is that going to change, you think, as AI expands and proliferates? Or do dashboards just get better, more trustworthy?
I think what happens to dashboards is that instead of you having to go to them, they come to you. You know, that the information a dashboard has is going to be so versatile that it comes to you instead of you having to go to a dashboard. Now, there'll still be some things that you're going to want a dashboard for, because quite frankly, that's a way of looking at information in some places that's really helpful, because you can compare things side by side. But the data that you need in order to make decisions, you should be able to get anytime, any place, as quickly as possible. And that sometimes takes away from a dashboard, because a dashboard, you got to refresh it, you got to call it up, it's got to be there. So I think dashboards just get better, and I think the movement of the data is going to get better too.
Awesome. Yeah. Better movement of data, better dashboards, and dashboards that find you. Maybe they anticipate the questions that you have.
Exactly.
We got to start putting this AI inside of the dashboard then, right? So the same way you have the AI that's writing your white paper, then you're going to have your AI who's going to write up and tell you what the dashboard is.
Exactly.
So that's analytics and AI together, right? The AI wrote the analytics.
That's it.
And that's the data's code. Okay, there we go. We circle it all together. But I mean, honest, no BS here. Like, that's not crazy. I mean, like if you actually are able to understand what are the problems people are doing, and you see kind of different ways of representing data and stuff, like I can foresee that. Actually, I'm curious. I haven't seen any work or anybody or any tools or companies having automatic generation of dashboards or stuff.
That's coming. You can see that in places. Yeah, you can see automatic generation of a dashboard, automatic generation of and display of data. That happens in a lot of different places.
All right, so time for our takeaways. Tim, take us away with takeaways.
Yeah, so tons of awesome takeaways today. Thanks so much, Teresa, for joining us. So we started off with, generally, data teams are struggling to keep up with the AI teams. That there's a lot of work that has to be done to support the AI teams. A lot of the data preparation work, data engineering work, so much so that even the AI engineers are having to do a bunch of time spent preparing it and munging the data, right? And not only are the AI engineers and the broader data teams needing to process the data, prepare the data for AI work, the AI work produces data. It produces these feature sets and these derived data sets that then become additional data that you want to leverage that can provide value to the company. And this starts to tie into, and this will come through our takeaways a few other times here, this idea of the data product, and there's these data products coming out of the AI teams, and a product approach could be a better way to standardize. Because you asked that question, right? Of, are AI teams following the same standards and approaches as the other data teams? Probably not by default. Are the AI and the data teams working together? Kind of depends on the culture of the company. Many companies that have collaborative cultures, those teams probably work pretty well together. But in some cases, it might be a more contentious environment. And what you find, what you also mentioned, sometimes you see these structural things where actually, an analytics or an AI team may more often than not be actually embedded into a part of the business, whether it's a particular product area, finance, marketing, some other part of the business, whereas the data team might be more centralized in a place like IT. So structurally, that can maybe cause problems at times. The way to help people focus on creating data products. We also talked about purchasing data, and purchasing data can also be, data products. Third-party data can be data products. And a place where you can manage your data products pretty effectively is maybe this analogy of like an exchange. It's kind of like that stock exchange that you have, where it's like a central corporate function where people can put in data products. They can be empowered to make their data available to others. You can get governance through that. It's kind of like a stock exchange. And if your data product's not being traded, then that's where maybe quality comes in, and you need to do a better job of enhancing the quality so it gets traded more. So I like that analogy. And teams that produce data, teams that consume data, and teams that produce and consume data, AI is, something that can affect all of that. And you mentioned this idea of data as code, where, everybody really manages the data. Everyone has responsibility around the data, and treating your data as code can be kind of a form and a way to think about this from a sort of a conceptual standpoint. So much more, but Juan, over to you.
Yeah, so I love the whole our discussion about the CDO and the CDAO, right? So you said you've been reading about, you were analyzing that CDOs have been hired that have more of a technical background. They're not business people, and yes, the CDOs, they need to understand the value of the data, but that doesn't mean that they need to know all about the data infrastructure. So it's this balance that needs to have, and let's be honest. Managing data isn't always the sexiest job, and not everybody wants to get into it. But analytics, that's the one everybody wants to get into it, because that's the one that is direct at cost savings and revenue. So the CDAO is actually combine the worst and the best jobs together. The CDAO, this is a good trend that we're moving towards, and they are in a position to make a bigger and a broader kind of business impact. And how do we get it in different organizations who have these two different teams separate, the data teams and the AI teams? Like, how do we get them to work together? Is with those KPIs, they need to be managed together for the different teams and have them get focused, aligned to the business. We're going to see all the skill sets for managing data is different from managing data products. I think this is a very, very important takeaway here. For data products, we're thinking about you need to test it. Is it sustainable? Make it available. You need to understand your market. What is the life cycle of the data? What does it need to be taken down? How do we do versioning? Who are the customers? What is the marketing behind this stuff, right? This is very different than just the kind of like the pure data engineering side of the infrastructure. And then kind of recommendations, data teams, they want to go very deep and understand the details, but you're encouraging them to broaden out and understand the big picture. If you can manage data well, you can manage the world well. And I see somebody wrote a comment about manage data, manage the world. And I kind of like that one. And then finally, advice for folks looking into kind of setting up their AI teams. Well, people will like, well, what is the biggest problem the company faces, and let's go put AI on it. It's like, we got to be careful, because sometimes those problems can be solved with statistical analysis. So we really need to understand what are the problems that the company has today that truly can be solved best by AI and not by existing approaches. Teresa, how did we do?
Wow.
Anything we missed? Anything to add?
No, that was great. That was great, guys. What a roundup. Amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, we just rounded up what you were talking about.
Yeah,
so this
that's
is
all you.
That was all you. So
that was great.
Okay, well, let's throw it back to you for 3 final questions. What's your advice? Who should we invite next? And what resources do you follow? I mean, people, books, conferences, blogs, podcasts, whatever.
Oh, my.
So what's your advice?
What's my advice? I think I've given you a ton of it already. My advice is, I don't think that data is going to get less important in an organization. It's going to get more. So my advice is to start paying attention to it now if you're not. If you are already, pay more attention to it. spend more money on it, put your better people on it, do things that make it different for you. That's my advice. Who should you invite next? I'm going to tell you, if you haven't already had her, you need to invite Maria Villar. Maria Villar is the head of data for SAP. She manages and teaches a master class in data. She's great. So that might be someone that you want to talk to. What do I read? Oh, I read everything. So I think the best solutions for today's problems come from understanding everything that's happening in the world, not just what's happening in the technical world. And so the technical world, I do a lot of reading of, I think that the newsletters that come across, TechCrunch and some of those, I do that. So I try and keep up with that. But then I read a lot of technical papers too. We're a member of the MIT organization, so I read a lot of research from MIT. But I think that it's still, from a data perspective, it's responding to the world in the shape that the world is in today. So look to the world for your data and for your capabilities.
This is a beautiful way of wrapping up this fantastic discussion we had today, Teresa. Thank you so much. And just a quick, next week is Thanksgiving in the United States. So Tim and I, we're going to take a quick break. So next week we won't have any live show. After that, on November 30th, we're going to have Allison Sagraves, who's a former CDO of M&T Bank. She has been an entire journey for, I think, 20 years at M&T Bank, closing out as a CDO. So it'll be a fantastic discussion with her. And then after that, on December 7th, Tim and I are going to be live at DGIQ in Washington, D.C. We're going to be the closing event at the DGIQ conference with Catalog Cocktails. So if you're in Washington, D.C., let us know, because we're going to be organizing some fun events.
That's great.
Yeah. And then with that, Teresa, thank you so much. This was a fantastic conversation.
It was great. It was wonderful. You guys are great.
Cheers, Teresa.